Hello and welcome once again to JordanCon, and welcome to all the people who are here for the first day or if it's your first panel. Hope you're having a nice time so far and having a nice weekend. This is the Team Jordan panel, and I will briefly introduce each person up here. And we are going to talk about a little book you might have heard of called A Memory of Light. That isn't so little, it isn't one book. So. Anyway, my name is Jason Denzel. I'm the founder and webmaster of DragonCon.com. I'll be moderating this today, and we're going to dive right in and meet the people up here. So we're in a big room. We do have a microphone, and we will try to project as best we can to all you way in the back. Okay? All right, so first up, real briefly, please stand up. This is Tom Doherty, the president of Tor Books, and one of the foremost publishers in the world. Harriet McDougal, or Robert Jordan's wife. Wilson Grooms, Robert Jordan's cousin and brother cousin. Mr. Brandon Sanderson. Maria Simmons, and Alan Romanczuk, right? Romanczuk. Alan and Maria are some of the assistant editors on this book and are just as in-depth as Harriet and everyone else here. So what I'd like to do here is we're just going to start diving in. We're here to talk about A Memory of Light, and she's waving this at me. Jennifer Liang would like to present something to the people on this panel. Thank you.
At DragonCon this past year, this was the first DragonCon right after Jim had passed, and we wanted to do something. Oh, I need a microphone. Okay, we wanted to do something to kind of like a memorial, kind of a condolence card kind of thing, and we made a banner. Help me out.
You take the other one.
Okay. We carried this banner in the DragonCon parade, and then we left it out in the track room, and anybody who wanted to could sign it and leave their good wishes for the family and anyone else. And this is going to go home with you guys today.
And it says on it, it says Robert Jordan, the years of his life, and then it said, "May the last embrace of the mother welcome you home." A quote from the books. Wow.
A lot of people
They like to see it.
Nice. It's lovely.
Okay, so. Harriet, let's start with you, and then we can see what everyone else has to say. The big question that everyone has, could you please tell us about A Memory of Light, its decision to be split up, and how that's going to work?
I'd be delighted to do that. Years ago, when Tom was founding Tor Books and I was his original founding director, we would make a little audio tape for the salesman on each month's books. And then at sales conference, I was meeting the salesman, and one of them said, "Oh, I'm delighted Harriet." Because I apparently always began saying, "I'm delighted to introduce the lead title for the book." I do want to say something about Maria and Alan. Maria has worked with Jim and now with me for 12 years. 13. See, she knows everything. She can even find my car keys. But Maria has run she has run Jim's office tremendously capably, as well as doing a lot of editing work for him all those years. Alan, is it 8 years or is it 9 now?
8.
8. See, he's a kid. But he is also wonderful and calls himself on this project the grim timekeeper, because one of the things he does is track the timeline. And if you've read Knife of Dreams, you can see everybody's all over the place. And the timeline is a little murky right there. So bringing everybody where Brandon can have who, when, is a huge job, as Brandon will tell you too. So I just wanted to say that. Now, A Memory of Light did start out, it was going to be one book, but when Brandon began working with the material that Jim had left, he said, there is no way I can complete this in less than 750,000 words. Tom Doherty tells me he's been checking the length of the Robert Jordan books, and the longest is 300,000. Emma, does your mother know you're out?
It's cold today.
No.
The average is about 300.
Yes. Brandon is saying the average is about 300.
I think the average is under 300.
He thinks the average is under 300.
I think it's over.
Sold.
Start counting. Go home and count how many words are on a page.
Yes, and then multiply it by the number of pages. And then think, shouldn't I get a life? In any case, 700.
Somebody's done it, haven't they?
Yes. 750,000 words is really an impossible length for a one-volume book. You'd have to put wheels on it, and it would have to be packed with a magnifying glass, even so you could read the 8-point type. It's not feasible to do that. We settled on 3 books because it seemed a very natural division. And Brandon figured, yeah, we can do that, and we talked about how this would happen. Actually, we were talking on the phone about that. And Brandon, Gathering Storm has come in at how many?
301,700 as of last night.
Do you hear that? 301,000 words. This is a third of the material. So, and another thing was, if you're figuring on 250,000 words, these guys, I mean, Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson, they don't write short. So it's good to have a little room. I mean, it's an extra 50,000 here.
Yeah.
Yes, Brandon wishes to put in his 2 cents.
Yeah, one of the other things on splitting it was we wanted to get a book to people as soon as possible. It's been now, let's see, Knife of Dreams was 2004, is that correct? 2005, okay. So it's been 4 years since there's been a book, and if we were to somehow conceivably find a way to bind this thing as one book, I was able to write 1/3 of it in about a year. To write and edit 1/3 of it in about a year. That means it would have been then probably 4 years to write all 3 portions, and then a year to edit it to get it going and things like this. You'll get it faster this way, and a lot by at least some counts, because you'll get it in installments. You'll at least be able to read something, and managing how to do a book that big. Anyway, I think people who are angry about it being split, they're angry because they're going to have to wait. You are going to have to wait either way. I'm sorry, it's just I'm writing as fast as I can. The quality comes first, the story comes first, and you can see on my website the progress bar has been moving. I haven't been flying, to Europe and goofing off. We've been working very hard. I think that this way you'll at least be able to see the progress and get chunks of it while you're waiting for that ending.
Brandon's really done a better job than that. Jason asked me some questions for posting on Dragon Mount, and one of them was, will people have a satisfactory climax in this book? The answer is yes, 2. This is not going to feel like an installment, except that all Wheel of Time books, you have some hopes, that it will be ongoing, but it will be a very satisfying, self-contained novel. And Tom, you've read it.
Sure have.
I think it's wonderful. I was just so delighted when I finished it, because I think that Brandon has been true to Jim's vision and his own, and given us something that's going to be read for generations.
And then I'd like to speak to the title question. We sort of galloped away with it. That it got into the catalog for the fall as A Memory of Light, : I think it said The Gathering Storm. And the Gathering Clouds, yeah.
That's what you gave me for the program.
Right. So, anyway, when the catalog was printed and Tom was sitting down with the sales force, they looked at him, at this enormously respected and astute publisher, and I am a very astute editor, if I do say so, and they said to us about the title we had agreed on, but a bookseller can't sell 3 books with the same title. We said, oh, yeah, it's true, because A Memory of Light, : The Gathering Storm, there isn't room on the computer line for the subtitle. So how would reorders be handled? Impossible, Possum, you can't do that. So, whammo, there we are, we've announced Gathering Clouds, and Storm was better. And naming books is what editors and publishers do after lunch. And Brandon has said firmly, and the second one, Shifting Winds, will have a new name. And it will. Brandon will produce one.
Yes.
Yes. And the third book at present is called Tarmangaden. Yeah. So, in fact, none of the 3 are actually called A Memory of Light.
We may want to make the third one called Memory of Light.
We might make the third one Memory of Light. Yes, Emma likes it. We're on a roll here. So we have thought of, we're trying to call it, that the series is ending with a trilogy within the series. And that well, it's what we do after lunch. We're trying hard to work with that, and maybe calling the third one a memory. We haven't figured it out yet. But it is from my darling Jim's stuff, very much. Brandon's doing a super job. And we're all convinced that there is no way Robert Jordan could have done this material in less than 3 books. And if you remember, he originally signed up for 6 books. And said, oh, that's too many. I plan to finish this in 3, Tom. Yeah. Thanks.
So really, one other follow-up question that people were having was, will
A Gathering's Thorn be considered book 12, and then the following one is book 13, and then there would be a book 14, or are you calling all three of them book 12 divided by 3?
No, 12, 13, 14.
12, 13, 14. Brandon, let's go over here to this end. So, Alan and Maria, you guys have been working on this very closely in the project. What are your thoughts on how Brandon's doing? What are some of his strengths, and what are some of the things that...
Don't think you guys are shaking on you.
Okay, I want to talk about something else for just a second. I understand that somebody here has a birthday this weekend.
There's a couple of birthdays.
A couple of birthdays, so Jason.
We have Tom Doherty. This is his birthday coming up in a couple of days, I understand, right? Rachel, is Rachel in here? Well, Rachel, who's our director of Con Ops, and has been one of the instrumental people in running this whole convention. It's her birthday as well. And then our good friend Trisha.
Yeah.
Her birthday. We just wanted to give them that special recognition. Back to you.
Okay. Brandon's strength, he's put up with us. There are 3 of us. We are opinionated. We can be cranky. We can make some really lame attempts at humor. And we're emailing him like crazy, saying, no, 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 that person would never say that. Or, wait, that's not that person's hair color, and everything else. And he stays calm. And he listens. And he goes and says, oh, wow, great catch. Thanks so much. And he goes back and he fixes it. And he's just really intent on making this book the best it can be, making it a tribute to Robert Jordan, making it true to Robert Jordan. He's just really working very hard on that and doing a great job.
I was going to ask if I could sit because my strength was flagging. Yeah, I'd like to say a few words about Mr. Sanderson, if I may. And this hasn't been vetted, so this may be my last day with the company. Brandon, like Robert Jordan, does not seem to ever be at a shortage for words. There's a good similarity there. He loves words. He plays with them. He has a ball with them. Like Jim, also, he has an innocence in his approach to imagination. I know it's hard to think of Robert Jordan and innocent in the same phrase, but he really had an innocence about him in his approach to life. When he got interested in something, he wanted to learn everything about it, would gut it, come at it from all different angles. And I see the same kind of thing happening with Brandon. And like Robert Jordan, Jim Rigney, it's the journey that seems to be important to Brandon, not the end, not finishing the book, not putting out 3 books this year, getting this money. He's obviously just having an absolute ball in his writing. And when I first picked up Mistborn and started reading that, I could tell this guy really is enjoying himself. His characters just pop, his action pops. He's having fun. What he is not, though, is Robert Jordan. And don't expect when you pick up the next book to find Jim's book in front of you. You are going to see the story as Jim laid out. The story is going to be there, and that's going to be from Jim. Some of the situations are going to be new out of Brandon's head, and I don't think you'll ever learn which is which. Those are secret files which will be burned shortly. But it's all being done in the spirit, and I can tell you because I've I've looked at Brandon and seen Jim's image above his head. I've never revealed this to anyone before, but I have this ability. And Jim is holding a baseball bat. And I know if Brandon goes too far out of line, that bat is going to descend, and descend hard.
I'm so far. No pressure.
But, so don't expect Jim's writing. You're going to find something different in its approach. It's going to be very accessible. Because what occurred to me in this whole process is, you know, life experience really is important. And Jim was close to my age, as with me. Wilson, been through Vietnam, been through actual wars, lived through the 60s. That alone is quite a thing. Survived the 60s. You know, so Jim was writing from his own perspective. Everything he put down on paper was coming out of those experiences. Brandon, you know, came from the Midwest. He eats meat and potatoes, not shrimp and grits or fried chicken. That wasn't on the menu. Has a totally different array of life experiences, and is you know, almost half the age that Jim was. And I think that's really wonderful because it has the potential for bringing a whole new generation and several whole new generations into the Wheel of Time canon. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Alan.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Coming back to Brandon, what, as you try to, first of all, you clearly inherited this large series that has a very distinct voice to it. Can you talk a little bit about your challenge that you have in trying to either match that voice or do something else with it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but one of the things, when I got this project completely out of the blue, having been a longtime fan of the series, I spent a lot of time thinking about how I wanted to approach writing it. And it occurred to me that if Harriet and Tom had really wanted to, they could have hired a professional ghostwriter. And a professional ghostwriter's job is to imitate someone's voice so perfectly that you can't tell. The problem with that is a professional ghostwriter, their focus is generally on the voice, imitating the voice, and they're not professional storytellers in the same way. And if they just wanted the voice, they would have done that. They would have hired someone who could, and then maybe said, you know, this book was completely finished before Robert Jordan passed away, and here it is. They could have done that. Other estates have done that before, and it has happened. It's, as I understand, more common than you might understand, you might believe. They didn't do that, and so I said, why not? Well, that's because there's a reconstruction to be done with this book. There are places where it's extremely detailed. There are places where there is full-blown writing, you know, in beautiful, wonderful Jim Rigney prose. There are places where there is scattered ideas, notes here and there, and all of these things. And part of my job then was not just to fill out an outline. Part of my job was to construct a book from all of this stuff and make the best book. One of the most interesting things about the notes is a lot of times Jim will be arguing with himself in the notes, and he'll say, I'll do this, no, maybe I'll do this, I'll decide later. It actually says stuff almost exactly like that. Or there'll be a scene that contradicts another scene. And it's kind of the, I'll do one of these two or maybe neither. And this is particularly true from the dictations, as he was talking through, and he'll say, I don't know what I'm going to do here, I might do this, I might do this, I might not. You know, just talking through these things, I looked at all of this and said, really, what they needed was someone who was themselves a writer, an epic fantasy writer, to look at this and make these decisions, make these judgment calls, and then, of course, present them and say, was this the right one? Part of being an editor, as I've mentioned, what an editor does, like Harriet, is to look at something and say, yes, you did a good job, or no, try again. But what the editor doesn't do is say, do it this way. Most of the time, the editor's job is to make the author a better writer rather than do it themselves. And so my job was to take all this stuff and make a book out of it, which would be as close to what Jim would make as possible, but at the same time, there are so many holes to apply my own writing skill and craft the book that I felt the story demanded. Really, the biggest weight of this is the previous 11 books, saying, here are the previous 11 books, here's what we have, what continues this. And so, I did not sit down and say, I'm going to imitate Robert Jordan's voice. I did not want to do that. I felt like if I tried too hard, it would be like parody. I had to sit down and say, how can I adapt my voice to be appropriate to the Wheel of Time? The Wheel of Time, it's different to me. I was not looking at imitating Jim. I was looking at saying what's appropriate for the Wheel of Time. There are certain things that are involved in the Wheel of Time that are different, that my style needs to be adapted for. And authors learn to do this. When I write in my middle grade voice, it's a very different voice from my epic fantasy voice. And my epic fantasy voice that I've written before is going to be a different voice from the Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time is much more descriptive in many passages than I am in my other books. And I looked at this and said, yes, I want to be more like this. It's what's appropriate for the setting. The other big change is Robert Jordan, the way he uses viewpoint, he is one of the masters of this genre. And the use of the third-person omniscient, I really sat down and said, I need to step it up a notch and be more like Robert Jordan was with viewpoint because of how powerfully he was able to do this. And so those are the two big adaptations I made to my style. I really do, I've read, there are scenes where he's written a few paragraphs, and then I filled in a few paragraphs, and then he's written a few paragraphs, and I filled in a few paragraphs, and I have trouble remembering where it was me and where it was him. So I think that you're going to have trouble. It's not that I'm imitating him, though. There are certain phrases and things that Jim used that I'm not sitting down and saying, what would Jim use for this word? Occasionally, we'll get notes back and say, this word just is not a Wheel of Time word, and we'll cut those out. And I tend to use words from a different generation, and Harriet is striking a lot of my, I'm more loose with my use of the word like than the older generation is, and those are all gone because it's appropriate to the style of Wheel of Time for those to be gone. And I've even told Harriet, make sure you change all of this stuff because Harriet's been the lens through all the books through which all the books have come previously. And so, if applying the same lens, the same filter to this book, I also think will give it the right feel. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone who's not a writer themselves, but that's what I'm trying to do.
And as his editor, I do feel that Brandon has done it, that you will find he's not Jim. I don't think we could possibly have found a ghostwriter who could have done Jim's voice because it was Jim. But what Brandon has done is really good, and I think you are going to be very pleased, and it is appropriate for a writer of Brandon's stature. This isn't some kid we found on the back lot. He's got his own books and his own skills and his own ways of doing things, and I think that Jim would be very pleased. And if that's a baseball bat, Alan, I think maybe it's rubber. I think you're going to be very pleased with this book. I am.
I'm going to leave a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience, but some other questions that, aside, not necessarily directly related to A Memory of Light, that people have been wondering and asking, is, for a minute, let's talk about these Outrigger novels. Before Jim passed away, he had talked about there were some other ideas. Jim had alluded to that there were other stories in the Wheel of Time world that may, it was never very clear if it may or may not take place after the end of the last battle. So he had considered possibly writing those. Barry, can you talk about that a little bit? And if they would get done and... Who would write them?
Hey, give me a break. Well, the Wheel of Time comes first, and we haven't really, I think any of us figured out what comes after that. When I was consulting, and I didn't just pick Brandon out of a hat, you know, I did take advice from editors I respect, Tom Doherty, the English publisher, and somebody said to me, one of these people said, well, the only thing I see wrong about using Brandon Sanderson is that he's already launched a fine career of his own, and I would hate to see him eaten up by this work. And that's a constant risk. We haven't even talked about the Outrigger novels. Holy mackerel! I mean, it's enough. He's looking at, what, at least, I think it's going to be at least 600,000 words for the next 2 books. Give the man a break. And maybe by that time, I will be gaga, and what we'll do is get Brandon to take over the editing on the Outriggers. Or maybe Doherty will be good and say, hey, I don't really need that signature money back. Maybe pigs will fly.
And besides, I'd like to see the Outrigger now.
Robert Jordan was very, very uncomfortable with the idea of anyone writing in his world who wasn't himself. He was extremely uncomfortable with this. And you may have seen his early quotes where he said he was planning to burn his hard drive, if, you know, with instructions to burn the hard drive when he passed away. He changed that during the last year, and asked Harriet to find someone. I think he even posted on his blog that he would find somebody. But, oh, he didn't do that? Okay. Being respectful of Jim's memory and his series also includes being respectful of his wishes. And he did have those other 5 books planned, 2 prequels, 3 Outriggers. Let's just worry about this now, and it's really, you know, maybe not. We don't want to see this turn into Star Wars, where there are dozens of writers coming in, and there's a new book every year. That's just not right for the Wheel of Time at all. And so yeah, so I've been telling people just wait. There's a chance. I mean, Tom really wants the Outriggers. He really wants the Outriggers, and a lot of people really want the other 2 prequels. But this is not going to go on forever. You guys can make it go on forever in your hearts and with the cons and things like this. But this does need to end. And particularly out of respect for Jim, we need to make sure that it's not just turning into let's exploit it for every book. And, you know, we're not going to do an Arthur Hawkwing book. You're not going to see a Luce Theron book. You're not going to see most of any of these things because he just didn't want it to happen.
Well, what he did want to happen, and what I have a contract for it, what I believe you guys would like to see is he decided that the Shan business couldn't be settled before the last battle. That the last battle was plenty on the plate. That this Wheel of Time would be set in the West, and that the Outrigger books, the 3 Outrigger books, are Matt and Tuan going back to Shan to get things straight there. And I bet you there's a lot of you that would like to see that too.
It's also true editorially that he has established the Shan culture so richly in the Wheel of Time books that there's a great deal there to be worked with. It really would be fun. I'd love to see the Grome roaming contentedly over their native heath, you know. But what would happen when they get back there and wicked old Matt and his dice? Prince of the Ravens, It would be a lot of fun, but we just can't, I mean, can't deal with it right now.
Yeah.
Just can't.
Yep.
And Tom, I must say, has been very patient. He really is.
Thank you very much for all those candid answers. I think we all appreciate that. I will get to the Q&A for you guys, I promise. But we have some internet questions that we had promised at this panel specifically to people that submitted, and so they're a little detailed, and so for whoever would like to answer them. First one, regarding Trollocs, sorry, is how did Jim decide which animals to use to create these creatures?
He just looked around the office.
Mean ones.
Mean ones?
Yes.
Just mean animals? Goats? One bit Jen once, so I guess that counts as being mean.
Not noble?
Another question we have is regarding some publishing stuff, is the prologue to the last few books has been published as an ebook. What are your thoughts on publishing either the prologue to Memory of Light as an ebook, or just in general the Wheel of Time as ebooks? Tom?
Harriet and I haven't talked about that yet. I would be open to considering it, and I would go with our wishes.
Earlier prologues have been sold as ebooks to Simon & Schuster, and I think they want this prologue, but the agent is now in London at the British Book Fair, and I mean, again, we just haven't gotten around to it. It's been flat out work. The editing, like the writing on this book, and everything else will follow in due course. I guess we ought to sort of get licking on that.
Well, Tor would be happy to publish an e-book prologue also.
Yeah, but old Simon, you know, they've been there, they've been good friends, sort of. And talked about, we haven't even talked about an e-book book. Wow. Can't take it into the bathtub, which is my personal benchmark for what is a book.
Don't drop it, yeah. Drop it, don't drop it. Give more than that.
All right, let's open it up for questions. There we go. I don't think I'll stretch over there, so you just have to project, please.
I was just going to ask, are you guys considering recommissioning, once the books are completely finished, redoing all the artwork, or doing new artwork?
The question is, it's not like you heard it, but the question for everyone is, would you consider recommissioning and doing new artwork for a new edition of the books?
That would be the top.
Yeah, we certainly would. We just wanted to finish. We thought this was not the time to change artists.
No.
It was kind of changing horses in midstream.
No, once it's completely finished.
Yeah, once it's completely finished, yes.
Anyone else?
Emma.
How are you going to deal with 3 books? Before it was that it was written as 1 book, but now it seems to be separate books. We have 3 prologues or stuff like that.
So the Emma's question is, in terms of taking A Memory of Light, which originally was conceived as 1 big book, dividing it up, will each book have its own unique prologue, chapter 1? Will each book begin with the, Wheel of Time turn, et cetera, et cetera? Brandon?
The short answer is yes, they will. What happened is Jim did a lot of work on the prologue. And it's a typical Jim prologue, like this. There are a couple of scenes I added to the prologue from notes and things like this. And there are a couple scenes that I actually moved to the main body of the book once I decided we were splitting this. I took half the prologue and moved that for Shifting Winds, to deal with plot arcs that weren't going to be in the first one. They're going to be in the second one. And I know for a fact that we're going to need some prologue scenes, which, scenes that he has indicated I will make into prologue scenes for the third one. So I'm betting all three will have prologues. I know the first two will, for sure. The first one does have an epilogue. The second one will have an epilogue as well. So I know those things are interesting to you. All three of them will begin with the iconic paragraph in chapter 1. How did we split this? One of the great things about the book is people are really curious of, are we going to get 1/3 of a story, 1/3 of a story, 1/3 of a story? You're not going to get that. As Harriet has said, there were so many things that needed to go into this book that it was already going to have about 6 climactic, honestly, that had to happen. And so spacing those out by book is actually going to make it a lot easier to bite off what's going on here, because there's so much going on and so many climaxes. And so each, particularly the first 2 books, there'll be a focus on certain characters, but almost everyone does appear. We're not dropping people off the face of the planet, except for, of the 30 or 40 important viewpoint characters, you'll probably get, you'll probably get 25 of them in a book. So there'll be some people who don't appear in particularly the first 2 books, but it's not going to be just half, and then, or just 1/3, just 1/3, just 1/3. It's going to be, so there are going to be important things that you've been waiting to see that will have to wait, so that each book has important things happening in them. Just so you know, the stuff that you all know has to be in, everyone knows some of the things that have to occur. Some of them will be in the first one, some of them will be in the second one, some of them will be in the third one. You aren't going to get them all, so you are going to have to read it and say, oh, I was waiting for this, I'll still have to wait for this. It'll obviously be the next part. Rather than shoving in a little bit of each of those, they each needed their own time and their own space to build in their own book, essentially. So.
Anyone else like that?
Other questions? Yes, sir, right here in front.
I was wondering, since they're being broken up into 3 books essentially, are there primary characters that are focused on for each of the 3?
Yes.
You don't have to name which one, just arcs.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you do need to name which one.
If you can convince Harriet, then I'll tell you, but you have to convince her.
Brandon could tell you, but then I'd have to kill him.
No matter what.
Back there in the brown shirt.
Will you be re-enlisting Kate Redding and Michael Kramer for the audiobook?
Yes.
That was my question.
We believe so. We haven't contacted them. If they're free, yes, we will use them.
Also, could you bring them to a convention someday?
Yeah.
Amazing, the superstars.
Bring them to a convention, Jenna.
Yeah, I actually was thinking, that'd be kind of cool theme for a convention, like do the audiobook kind of thing, so.
For what it's worth, I think that there's at least one website, Bob, that said that Michael Kramer and Kate Redding were going to be doing it, or
Amazon.com has it.
Amazon says that they are. So there you go.
It was our intent. I did not know that they had signed a contract.
Excuse me. Way in the back. Oh, that's you, Matt.
I'm not asking it, ask me. Brandon, I heard you earlier mention that you said something to the fact that Jordan had left some characters that explicitly were or were not going to die, and that you weren't going to kill off anyone that he had said you could if it wasn't a major character. But so I have something along the same line, a question along the same lines regarding threads of plots and such. Jim had said that he wasn't going to leave them all closed at the end of the book. Did he leave a detailed list of which plot threads would be closed, which ones would be open?
Actually, yes, he did. One of the most detailed things in the notes is a long list of how everything ends up after, and with explicit answers on several things that aren't to be answered. He says, this doesn't get answered, this doesn't get answered, this doesn't happen, this does, this does, this does. Along with, he was very detailed on how things needed to end up. And so there's very little of me, you know, making things up there. There are some minor characters that'll be left to me, but plot threads and characters for the end, it's really all there.
Thank you.
I was just curious, once the 14th book is done, is Tor planning on releasing like a collector's edition full 14 pack? I have a limited amount of funds, so I'm gonna start saving. I'm just curious if you guys are planning on releasing a full collector's edition, or it's just gonna be individually added.
We haven't dealt with that yet.
The question was, is Tor going to produce a collector's edition, a full 14 pack? And I think that Tom should definitely do this, and it should be packed in a Louis Vuitton steamer trunk.
I would buy it.
How about a memory of like the final 3 books as an omnibus? Brandon, you've mentioned the possibility before.
Well, I've meant, yeah.
I've mentioned that I will push as hard for one as is reasonable. It's, number one, not my choice, and number two, I'm a writer, not a publisher. I'm not aware, you know, I don't pay as much attention to things like this. If it's feasible, I'm sure that Tom will do it, but Tom doesn't know how many pages it is. He doesn't know, he's looked at me and said, Brandon, if it's really that long, I just don't think it's possible. But I will continue to be an irrational fan and push for it to happen. But yeah, if it doesn't happen, it will be because it can't happen, not because they don't want to.
Great.
Oh, sorry. I would just like to say that even if it can happen, which I doubt, I really doubt we could bind the 3 of those things. I think it would be a lot more comfortable, a lot more pleasant to make a 3-book box set, all nicely bound. These books will be as thick as the books you're used to. Can you imagine what that would look like in one?
I think if you can take the Bible and put it into something like this, you know, really thin pages, you can have leather bound.
How many pages is the Bible?
1,000 plus.
Well, this is going to be much more than 1,000.
Just saying, in micro thin paper with the...
Yeah, the little thumb things on the chapters. And the binding.
And this is going to be close to 2,000 pages.
It's going to be irrational and push for it.
I'm just giving Tom a hard time. I agree with him. I think a box set would be the way to go.
Yes, well, I am a young adult librarian, and I noticed that the first 3 books are split into the more approachable sizes. Is there any plans to do the other in the series and split them up for young adult readers?
For those who could not hear, the question was, in the past, the first 2 books in the series, The Eye of the World and The Great Hunt, had been published, had been divided up into 2 parts each and published as for the young adult market. And so, for example, the first book was, you know, From the 2 Rivers, and the next one was To the Blight. Those combined were for The Eye of the World. The question was, will that be happening for other books in the series?
Part of the reason we thought it most appropriate on the first 2 to break them up was they had natural breakpoints, which not all the books have.
Right.
And secondly, the characters are younger. They have a younger feel. Imagine the difference between the Rand of the first 2 books and the Rand of Knife of Dreams.
That's a good point.
Yes, Lee.
Just a quick question about the cover art. I was wondering when usually they release beforehand, you know, the cover so that we can see it before it's actually published, or are you guys going to do that for Gathering Storm?
The problem is this: we really felt that we should use Daryl Sweet for consistency for these 14 books. Daryl has been sick
Daryl is much older than he was and is not painting at the level he once painted. And he is working as hard as he can on it. And we've just seen another sketch, but the painting is not done. And when he'll have it done, we're not really quite sure, because we really want to get the best we can from Daryl Sweet.
So it's basically up in the air.
The sketch is very good. There were great problems with the first sketch, and we had a snafu, nothing to do with Daryl, but it didn't get caught as quickly as it might have. And Daryl's work is very good. When Tom says,
it did have to do with Daryl because he was sick
yes,
for months.
he was sick, and so he was slow. But it's good work. But then if he has to go to the hospital for 3 weeks, you know, the schedule gets messy. And I would say, Tom, if you get the cover in and it's satisfactory, which I firmly believe it is now, or will be, then I'm sure you will release it ahead of time.
Oh, absolutely. And what we have now is a sketch which corrects the problems we had with the original painting.
Yes.
He hasn't done the painting from the sketch we've just approved, but we approved the sketch a week ago, and it will take him a while to implement.
And it will be on dragonmount.com when it comes out.
DragonCon first.
Or, yeah, we're DragonCon.
I called
Yes,
dibs.
I just had a quick question about, obviously in this day and age with fan testing books like this, the media, we instantly want to turn it into a movie. Particularly your kind of opinion on this, Harriet, if you would let us know kind of what your feeling is on how well that can be done, if it should be done, and so forth.
The question was, is this panel's opinion, specifically Harriet's, I suppose, opinions on a possible Wheel of Time movie
Or TV series.
or TV series. Let me preface that answer by saying that tomorrow we added something to the schedule. Tomorrow at 2:30 we are going to be doing a dedicated panel discussing possible Wheel of Time movies with the representative from Red Eagle who has the rights to the series. That said, Harriet, is there anything you would like to say briefly on it?
No.
Okay.
It was hard to get Larry Mondragon up on his hind legs to talk about it, but you'll have a chance tomorrow.
We'll certainly talk more.
We'll chat a whole lot about it tomorrow. So, okay, couple more over there.
My two quick questions. First one's really quick, I promise. Brandon, how long was your happy dance when you realized that you were going to find out everything as a fan?
It's still going on. No, I mean, it was pretty cool. And the weight of responsibility threatens to crush it down on frequent occasions, but it's still going. So yeah, it's there is still that little bit of sadness that I think I mentioned it yesterday. I, unlike you, will never be able to just pick up this book off the shelf and read it for the first time. That's what I give up. But I'm sure none of you feel too sorry for me since I got to, in December of 2007, read the ending, which, you know, Jim has been saying from the beginning he had in his head, and he did get down before he passed away. So, yeah. I know you don't feel sorry for me.
Part two was, do you find it difficult if you're reading the things that Jim has written and it just doesn't fit to cut? Do you find that as writer?
Yeah, when I'm reading the stuff Jim has written, is it hard to cut? My standard has been, if Jim wrote it, we don't cut it. We may have to edit it. And at certain points we've had to. In fact, we found, this is kind of fun. I can't give you any specifics, of course, but we were just going through one of these latest drafts, and Maria sent off a big email, oh no, I found a huge inconsistency with the book before, with Knife of Dreams. We're going to have to fix this, Brandon. And I looked back and I wrote back and said, that's one of Jim's scenes. And, you know, I understand completely. As a writer, you write these things down a lot of times, and then you get the soul of the scene first, and then you look at, all right, let's fix consistency, let's make sure the details and the visuals, but you're working on the characters and the soul of the scene first, and then you revise it down. And a lot of these scenes exist in all different states. this is actually, it's a very Jim scene, but it also had a huge, not huge, I mean, it took like 2 lines of editing. But I did have to go back and revise some of the things that Jim had written to fix that problem and things like this. And that is having to happen through a lot of these scenes because he didn't intend any of these. Harriet told me once Jim would do 12 drafts of a book before he'd show it to anyone. 12 drafts before he showed it to anyone. And a lot of the things that we have are first, second, third draft sort of things. And so part of my duty is to revise those things and stuff like that. But when I hope that Maria can attest to this, when she comes to me and says, Jim said this, you know, our default is, well, we do that then. Once in a while, I'll tweak some little thing like that hasn't been in the books yet, that in the notes will say, this character, you know, they're from this city, and for the narrative to work, they have to be, you know, little things like that that haven't appeared. But the default is, if Jim said it, we do it. And so that's, you know, we want to make the best book possible, and so editing does have to happen. But I'm not gonna cut any scenes that he wrote. I'm gonna find ways. I mean, they belong in the book. So yeah.
Yes, sir.
Brandon, it looks like a lot of talk is, you know, how you're filling in parts from where Robert Jordan has already finished. Would you have liked perhaps maybe a little more freedom with the book as far as plots and threads go, and characters, endings, and you know what happens to them?
The answer is no. Really, it is easily answered. Part of what makes this book possible is that I have all of that. There is actually just the right balance for me, because there's enough for me to create and do. There are enough places where Jim said, they're here, you know, we know they're here in Knife of Dreams. Jim says they're here by the end, and I get complete liberty to fill that in. But in the most cases, I've got more direction than that. There's enough of that to keep me sated, but it's such a big project anyway. I've said before, the only way that the reason this book is possible is that we have an ending. And if you know anything, my writing style is I actually work from an outline. I outline and I actually write toward endings. This is how I build my books. Is I always come up with the ending first. I actually very detailed write down an explanation for myself of my ending, and then very powerful scenes in between, and then I write goal-based toward those scenes. When Harriet handed me these, I remember telling her the very first time I went to visit, I said, this is how I design an outline for myself. Is I work, you know, toward a very big climactic ending, and we already have that, and so it's actually very natural for me to work on this. It's exactly what I would have wanted. Though, you know, to be perfectly honest, I would want even more if we could have it. But, you know, the more of Jim, the better, and the less of me, the better. So, yeah.
Other question? Yes, sir, in the hat.
Did Robert Jordan design all the chapter icons himself, and are we going to be seeing any new ones?
The question was whether or not we were going to be seeing any new chapter icons.
Yeah, and did Robert Jordan design all those?
Oh, and did Robert Jordan design them?
No, he did not. I'm not sure he designed. He might have thought up. Well, of course he thought up the halves of the yin yang, the flame of Tarvalon and the dragon's fang, which are described in the text. But mostly I thought them up. And they were drawn in the beginning by Patrick Nielsen Hayden's brother-in-law, who's a very good graphic artist, I think you'll agree. And as time went on, Elisa Mitchell took over, the woman who did the black and white maps, and who's a pleasure to work with. We commissioned several new ones for the New Spring prequel, and this book will have one new one. And I haven't seen it yet. Paul? It's Paul, isn't it? But we need to.
Other question? Yes.
Jim left a lot of tapes and material. Is there any way that might be published? Some of the material Jim left?
The question was, before he died, Robert Jordan left the audio recordings of himself telling the end of the story, will those be ever made available?
Well, you'll hear one this afternoon at 5:30. It will be, it's a 13-minute recording. We don't plan to publish them. These are pretty much, this one is nice and complete, and but some of them are pretty rough. And it's not fair to publish a writer's notes and his very early drafts.
Other questions? We have a few more minutes still. Yes, sir.
Just wondering, will the timelines be staggered since it's being broken up into 3 books, like between Path of Daggers and Crossroads of Twilight?
Do you mean the publishing schedule, or are you talking about?
No, the actual character timelines. Okay. Like some events.
One of the big challenges for this book is, as you probably can guess, everyone is pointed toward the same event, Tarmageddon, right? And so the timelines, actually the character timelines, for many, many books have been staggered. It's just never been quite as obvious as it was for Winter's Heart and Crossroads of Twilight. Those were the most obviously staggered, where we went back in time and covered most the same time that it had already been covered and things like that. But it's been happening. Jim was just a master at sleight of hand, so you don't realize this, but several of the characters, by the time we're at the end of Knife of Dreams, are weeks and weeks off from other characters. And things that you're seeing, even like in the epilogue of Knife of Dreams, is, you know, very oddly staggered with a lot of things. And so one of my goals was to start bringing things back together. There will be some staggering like that between the first 2. It's just going to happen because certain characters are just in different places and different times. But the goal is to be bringing this back together. And so they will not be parallel novels, though some scenes will be parallel. There will be certain scenes that we jump back and then catch forward and things like this, but they're not going to be identically parallel novels happening exactly at the same time.
Other questions?
Bob.
One of the things that I've enjoyed so much about Wheel of Time versus other fantasy series is the humor. In just about every book, there are hysterical scenes. Now we're getting closer to Tarmageddon. It's getting darker and darker, but are we still going to get some humor?
Yes. As long as Matt's alive.
Okay, with that answer, who's the funnier writer, Brandon or Jim?
I take the vote.
Read and find out.
Read and find out.
Yes, sir.
Is there any chance for further video games? The old Legend Wheel of Time game was quite fun. It's been long.
I think we're going to cover that tomorrow at 2:30 with the Red Eagle Talk, unless anyone wants to briefly add anything. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question in regards to the battle scenes, and I've been meaning to ask you this, Brandon, and it just keeps slipping my mind. But one of the things that I thought always characterized Jim's work was that he made such realistic battle scenes, and no doubt that's because of the life experiences he'd had. And I wondered if you did any sort of special research to help that, since the combat you've covered in your own novels has been quite different for the most part.
The answer is yes. And actually, Harriet and I were discussing this quite in depth yesterday at lunch because we've got a lot of battles coming up. And I'm going to several sources. I don't want to reveal all of them, but one of them was one of Jim's favorite, which was Lao Tzu, Art of War, which was one of his. I've been studying that and reading that, knowing that he used that as part of his military strategy. And Harriet primed me on how he was approaching these things, and it's going to be a major source of research for me over the next year, so that I can get ready for the further we get along, the more fighting there's going to be. Obviously, that's not revealing too much, and so yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of that, and I can, after the books are out, I will be able to talk more specifically, because right now, if I tell you what I'm studying, I mean, Lao Tzu's not going to give away too much, but if I tell you other things I'm studying, it probably will. Knowing you people, it definitely will. So, I'm going to say, ask me afterward.
Sounds good.
Brett.
Yeah.
Just add one more thing. We have promised to take Brandon out on a paintball course before he takes the tourniqueted seats.
And you're going to invite fans along to do that too, right? Other questions? We still have a few. Sure.
Wow.
Come on, there we go. Okay, yeah. Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Doherty, after the series is complete, could we have a book that's an atlas that has maps for each book so we can see where everybody went in their journey across the map? Because we all know that big map at the beginning of the book, and the places aren't in there that appeared later. And I was talking with Harriet earlier, and she was saying that Jim said, well, nobody ever knew about Waterloo until the battle was fought, so what use was putting it on the map then? But at the end of the series here, we'll all know about the important places, and they would mean something to us then. And I've been wanting something like that. I'll buy the book.
I'll buy the second.
There's going to be an encyclopedia of Wheel of Time when it's finished. And in that encyclopedia, we plan to have some extensive use of maps.
Yes, I've signed a contract to do the encyclopedia, and I'm thanking my lucky stars and the pattern that the manuscript is not due until a year after the final book. For obvious reasons. How can you have an encyclopedia before the thing is through? Anyway, I'll be doing that with Maria and Alan, who are indispensable.
Question over here.
Okay. Yesterday you guys were talking about how Robert Jordan got into the characters, and sometimes you could tell which character he was by the way he came into the house. My question is for Brandon about which characters you are most excited or have been the happiest to kind of get into and embody, and which of the villains, I guess, have been the most satisfying to embody or the hardest.
This is another one that you're probably going to have to ask me afterward, because saying too much now will tell you who's in the book and who I haven't written yet and things like that. I can tell you that at different points in my life, different characters have appealed to me the most, depending on how old I am and when I'm reading and what's going on in my life. And so at various points, I can say most of the characters have been my favorite, quote unquote, and it just depends on the year and the read and things like this. Generally, one of my rules of thumb is when I'm writing in a character's viewpoint, they're the most important character, even if they're just a side character, and you really have to get into their head, even if they've never had a viewpoint before. They are now, as far as they're concerned, the most important character in the entire book, and you have to treat them like that. And so being a writer, part of it is getting into the mindset of the character who you're writing in and being most excited about them. I will also say that one of the things I was very excited about for working on this book, after being very familiar with Knife of Dreams and things coming along and seeing the way that Jim was pointing the books, was the focus coming back to some of the main characters that the focus hadn't been on for a while. I felt Jim was already doing that, and so I was very excited for that opportunity, and I think that these 3 books will continue that trend. Kind of looking back at, it's the Wheel of Time. The people that we began with, we're coming back to and spending a lot of time with, and so that's one of the things you can look forward to in the book.
Last question.
No, you did the last
Oh,
question.
that was the last question. All right, sorry. Quick reminder that at 5:30, 5:30 is when we're going to have the exclusive world premiere preview of A Memory of Light. Apparently, we're going to be listening to Robert Jordan read it to us personally, recorded.
Actually, he was dictating what is the first scene of the prologue of Gathering Storm.
That's a 5:30 tonight. Thank you for joining us. fact, I really is the problem.
I stayed in
Oh, well, in a lot of ways, right, yeah. All different, the same sort of expectations, and what you're trying to bring we can't just visual direction. I mean, it doesn't want
My name is unique enough that Google searches it's somebody I don't have what my students pull me up I'm trying to and we just try to what's apparel as soon as the station is over. You don't have to leave and come back in. You can't just stay. Are you kidding? I'm not kidding. I'm totally kidding. Unless I'm not.
Yeah, well, I don't envy that struggle because you're all right. You're going to have to do this. I mean, yeah, it can be done.
You've been frustrated because I
want to be here. You want to use me? Help us on the website.
Are you local or are you far away?
Make sure that you tell him you're on.
See me at some point when we have the paper. I'll give you an email. You can reach me on. Talking to the song, I'd like to make sure and I worked out the deal. I'm available. It's like you can write that Star Wars. Yeah. No anywhere. Yeah. It's not really dark. Right. Exactly. And stripes when it's right. Put in by the box. And so it's good. So these two we're still going to be tugging you aside. I'm fine with that. I think we all have. This is going to be, it's going to be a supportive thing. Resolution. Good idea with the results out there, but I don't want to I want to make sure that you're justice and setting up anything that might be important. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm sure all those talking to you.
Okay. Brandon, we have something.
Oh, wow. Yes, the Aaron Mark. I think it's yeah. My workshop is lacking. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm gonna lose. Jimmy's the master of sword forms. Oh, okay. Okay. So do I hang this next to the sword that Wilson gave me?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I've told you about the sword he gave me, right? Yeah. That he gave me a sword that has a red and gold dragon on the scabbard. Yeah. I mean, can you believe that Jim actually that I walked in there and you know a lot of people have complained the sword's already bad. And no one had taken the sword, the black scabbard sword with the gold and red dragon on it. I'm like, what? And so, yeah, I grabbed that and was gone. Yeah. Thank you guys. What's that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't need anything. I want to be here and listen to this. I've actually never heard of the I've got the dictation. I've read it, 100 times. Yeah. But I've never heard him actually speak it. So. We're at the end of Alpharetta. It's not what it's Congress because Harriet and Maria both said that it was strong. Okay, but it's not a
all this is that Terra breaks it down, globe shadows, and melts and bubbles like wax. And then all it says is that on Tremalking, they realize the time but it says, that's why, if you were
How's it going on this stuff?
It's doing great so far.
Awesome.
I think we got, this was the best reported panel yet.
Good. That was the one everyone wanted.
I got better. We had some trouble when I had the webcam over there with people stepping in front of it.
Oh, I see.
Sitting in front of it. Then we after this time.
Good. So we're for the.
I'm really happy with that last session.
Good, and we'll do it next for this panel where they're reading it. We're reading the Jim's reading it.
All cameras and recorders are going to be off for that. As Jennifer requested.
Oh, she wanted no recordings? That makes sense.
And you guys were all over here when they were doing the documentary. Remember that at the end of it, they started talking like creative stories, and apparently like and they shot the works out of it and she ran into the backyard.
These selections with explanations can be on other parts and things like that.
We only lost 2 people the entire time.
I'm going to push forward, but
so we thought that was
Harriet is so overwhelmed right now, and
we only lost 2 people that lost anything.
Hey, what's up? I just wanted to mention that just to see if I make some changes to my tank. Okay.
My go-karts are very helpful.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is going to go in there. A lot of it will, but the notes, I want to, if I have my way, get my things all on a CD in the back of the explanation.
So you may have been talking to someone who knows.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just honestly, that happens at DragonCon. Yeah, the DragonCon hotels have problems with that too. So some people are just But thank you for letting me know. Yeah, because believe me, I went through this several times with them. They knew we were coming. And according to what we briefed all the staff on what to expect from us, like what's right. So they actually changed their operating procedures this weekend for us.
They're not going to release them. I think the last one right before the announcement, we were planning for all the books, like 2 separate all of them were invited, so it's still hard to get in our heads that we would call one of them so we'll just see what happens, but yeah.
I understand. It could be just a marker on their badge that means they give them a chapter like
got the third one today.
No, I'm not done.
Actually,
Thank you very much.
Min has to impress the pride of trying to write more for you. It's going to see you can see if I can but yeah, some kind of
The main thing that I would tell you
right. You could give them letters instead of numbers. Yeah.
which means that you have to understand that learning to write something or learning, nobody's perfect.